Well, hey, everybody. Hope your week is going well. Today we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and there's a lot of verses in this chapter you could underline, and hopefully you've already read it and written in your journal what stood out to you, what God is teaching you, and how you're going to respond to it. I think this chapter for a lot of us really hits home. He's very raw. He's very real. He's very honest in this chapter. He just lays out there for everyone to see his struggle, and he's searching, he's struggling. Where do I find meaning in life that is not passing? And he describes several things that he tried, that he attempted in order to find meaning and purpose in life. Starting in verse 1. He tried pleasure, whatever pleased me, having fun. But no, ultimately, he said it's futility or vanity, the same Hebrew word there in verse 1. Starting in verse 4, he goes on to talk about all the works that he accomplished, all his possessions. He talked about houses and parks and ponds and gardens and vineyards, slaves, flocks, herds of sheep and different things, silver, gold, concubines, sex whenever he wanted, a different woman every night. Really, anything he wanted in verse 10, anything that he desired, anything he thought would give him pleasure. And yet he says in verse 11, it's vanity. He said, thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun. He said, all these different things I tried for pleasure, in the end did not make me happy, did not add purpose and meaning that lasted to my life. And then he says, well, what about wisdom? Now, remember, this is Solomon. He'd asked God for wisdom, be the wisest man, and God made him very, very wise. And he talks about all of that. And yet at the end of that conversation in verse 14, he said, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. So there are advantages to wisdom. But, he says in verse 14, yet I know that one fate befalls them both. He said, the person who lives with wisdom will live a better life than the fool who doesn't walk in wisdom. But in the end, they both die. So wisdom, while it made life better, did not prevent death from coming. So there's got to be more. There has to be something more than just being smart and wise in how you live when it comes to meaning and purpose. He said, look at verses 18 and 19. He said, thus I hated all the fruit of my labor for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. He said, all this stuff I worked so hard for, when I'm dead, somebody else will have all of it. Verse 19, and who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. And I wrote in my Bible, wow. But he's right. You work and work and work to leave an inheritance to your kids, and you have no way of controlling whether your children and grandchildren, who will have what you leave when you die, you have no control over whether they are wise or foolish. And we know that most kids who receive an inheritance have spent it all within a year or so. And much of it is wasted. Wow. You work hard, you're a workaholic, you're driven. Look at what he says in verses 24 and 25, he said, there is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God, for who can eat and who can have enjoyment without him? Part of what he's saying there is, maybe the best you can do is just enjoy what you have. It's not going to give you ultimate meaning, but maybe that's the best there is. Just enjoy. I skipped ahead there back in verses 22 and 23. What does a man get in all his labor and in his striving with which he labors under the sun? Because all his days his task is painful and grievous. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is vanity. So, hey, you work hard. You're going to leave it when you die, and some fool may waste it. Where's the purpose and meaning in that? You work so hard, even when you lay down to sleep at night, your mind is racing because you don't know how to rest. He said, man, what's the value in that? And then he says, maybe in verses 24 and 5, maybe the best we can hope for, maybe the best we can do is just, be wise and work hard and enjoy it. It's not going to add ultimate meaning to life, but it adds some joy, and maybe that's the best we can do. Now, he still hasn't given us the answer to where ultimate meaning comes from. That's later in the book. Right now, it's like we're sitting over on the, in a chair on the side, out of sight, in a room, listening to him talk to his counselor. And he's just laying it all out there, his struggle, and we're getting to watch, to listen. But we can identify with it. We can identify with it. You slave your whole life to leave it to your kids. And often, what do? They just waste it. You work and you can't rest because your mind is consumed by your work. Hey, enjoy. So what does he teach us here? That the things of life that we slave for are transitory. You will die and leave them behind. All of it. They will give you some joy in life, so enjoy them. Okay? I enjoy my screened-in porch on the back of my house and listening to the birds chirp. I enjoy that. But that's not where ultimate meaning in life comes from. So what do? Like I said, he hasn't given us the answer yet. So stay with the journey. Stay in the book of Ecclesiastes. But for now, struggle with this reality, because the truth is what he is describing here is how most people live. People who don't have faith, people who don't know Jesus. Where's their meaning in life come from? Maybe it's their family. Maybe it's their career. Maybe it's their athletic achievements. Maybe it's that business they built. And those will add joy to life. But when you're dying, and it's just you and your God, even if you're surrounded by loved ones, you're dying. That business is not going to make you feel peace. All those things you accomplished, you'll feel good about them, but they're not going to give you peace in that moment. And yet, most of the world tries to find its purpose and ultimate meaning in life from the things that don't last. And that's what Solomon is struggling with in this book. Stay with the journey. We'll see an answer. But struggle with the reality that life lived without God ultimately has very little meaning. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at the next chapter. God bless you, everybody.